Welcome to the video. So I've been making some of these videos which are kind of a random selection of albums from my collection. And kind of the idea is really to surprise myself. Um, Kind of just digging in and drawing out stuff that I haven't listened to for a long time and trying to rekindle some kind of memories and some associations around these particular albums and why they ended up in my collection. And almost every time I've done it, there's been one example, maybe sometimes two examples, where I pick out an album that I haven't listened to. So it might have been there for years, but I've never listened to the album. And one or two people in the comments have said, well, why do you retain albums in your collection that you've never listened to? And it's a really good question. And I think when I go back to when I started collecting records, which started around 1970, 72, something like that. And what the name of the game then was that they're real quite precious things, records, when you're a young teenager, because you haven't got much money. You got a bit of pocket money. You might have a paper round or some other little job. You'd buy albums. You kind of have to save up a little bit and buy albums, and you gradually be building up your collection. And this is what happened to me. I managed to buy records steadily over 2 or 3 years and gradually build up a little collection. Now, in those days, when you're collecting records at that sort of pace, you are, every single album inside out. You used to have to get into albums. If you remember getting into albums, where you'd buy an album and you'd not be sure the first. In fact, you knew in your head that you're not going to get this album straight away. You're going to have to dedicate some time and have multiple playing sessions so you could begin to appreciate the finer details of the recording, shall we say. And so I was gradually building up my collection, and of course not every album that I bought was a great album, obviously. And after about 3 or 4 years, I had such an appetite for more new music that I began to go through the collection I built up at that point, and kind of was honest with myself and said, well, look, I don't like this particular album, or this other album is mediocre. Maybe if I sell 2, 3, 4 albums, take them to the second-hand record shop, I'll be able to trade them in or sell them and have enough money to buy one new great album. So I gradually, I went through a period of time where I was buying records and then selling the odd one, or a small number of them, in order to fund buying even more new records. Now, cut to the 1980s, where I'd still been collecting records, and again with some real dedication and commitment to give them a really positive, proper listen. And CDs came along, and a lot of and of course, I jumped on the CD bandwagon like everybody else, but by that time I'd stopped selling my records. So I didn't really sell any records after around about 1980. So the record collection has just gradually got bigger and bigger and bigger, much to the annoyance of the rest of the family. Everywhere you turn, there's stacks of records. It's just the way it is. But as I was collecting CDs, so were other people. But unlike me, a lot of them were selling their vinyl records. And what happened was, is that I started to frequent, after the novelty of CDs wore off, and I think what really made the difference to me is that I think I had a repair to be done on a record turntable that I had. And I took it to a kind of a repair shop, and I met this guy who would be making modifications to turntables to make them ever more refined and to extract even more music from those vinyl grooves. And listening and chatting to this guy, he whetted my appetite around buying a new turntable, which was a big step up from what I had before. And then I had a frenzy of buying record turntables, and always seeking to get the next higher quality turntable with tone arm or cartridge or whatever it might be. So I started by off eBay lots of different turntables. And of course, when you got all these new turntables, you begin trading, getting rid of the old ones, although I've still got too many. Getting rid of the old ones, and then thinking, well, I need some new software to play on these turntables. So you start frequenting, I did, secondhand record shops again with a little bit more interest. And of course, because everybody had pretty much sold their record collections, you'd be picking up really high quality pressings, good condition, in good condition, records really, really cheap. And I would go to places, various favorite record shops that I knew of. One in particular in Rugeley in Staffordshire, called Those Old Records, and the proprietor, Chris McGranahan. And Chris was great, so I would go in routinely into his record shop, spend a couple of hours in there, and I'd pick 100 albums. And then I would say, Chris, how much do you want for those? And he'd add up all the prices for them, and then take like 25% off or whatever. So, good customer buying in bulk. So I started to, really started hoovering up lots of vinyl records, and gradually built up the collection more and more. And then what happened is that I became a paying member of Spotify. So I was paying the premium £10 a month, which gave me access to presumably millions of tracks or whatever it would be. And so I was sitting there working or sitting doing something else, and then I'd be playing Spotify on random. And what happened is that I began to realize that listening to music in such a way wasn't really listening to music, it was hearing music. So it was this, I call it like oral wallpaper. So it's on in the background, it's not really capturing your attention, but it's kind of pleasant. It's a pleasant noise, and, the occasional dissonant track in amongst the more laid-back stuff. It's what random play is all about. And I ran with that for about 2 or 3 years, still buying records, as it were, and then found myself in a situation where I realized that what I'd been building up with vinyl was not a collection, but it was a library. And Spotify basically reinforced that notion that the music that I was listening to on Spotify wasn't in my collection, it was just a library I was tapping into. And one of the things that I also enjoy is I enjoy browsing through secondhand bookshops. So I like buying my books as well. And and of course, anybody who's into buying books will know that they'll probably have bookshelves with many, many volumes still unread, but they're still important. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, I read The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy, and I read just about all Thomas Hardy's novels back in the 1980s, and never got around to Return of the Native until just a couple of weeks ago. But it had been sitting there on my bookshelf for 30 years. And it's a nice feeling to be able to take a volume off the shelves, open it up and read it and really be impacted by it. It was a really wonderful, wonderful novel. And so I think the parallel between books and records is very strong for me. So when I think about the records that I've got in my collection, my library, is that I can kind of go anywhere and almost find any genre of music, any artist, and be able to find an album. And it might be on the back of seeing something on YouTube or watching TV or reading an article in a newspaper or a magazine or on the internet. And my curiosity is pricked, and then I go out there and I pick an album from the shelf and I give it some focused, dedicated listening, and I can get some real enjoyment out of that. One of the issues having a library is that you run out of space, and so there is the question is, well, what do you do with these records that you maybe bought 25 years ago that you've still not really listened to? Do you sell them? And one of the difficulties that I've got is that I can't see myself dedicating the time required to go through the collection, to pull out albums that I'm not really interested in anymore or I've never really listened to, and then go through the palaver of advertising them, packaging them up, shipping them, selling them. And I don't want to just go along to a record shop and give them hundreds and hundreds of records in great condition just for a few pennies, because you don't make a lot of money selling records. So I'm lumbered with my record library, and I kind of get this, I kind of console myself thinking that, well, at least I can listen to anything I want, anytime I want. Now, what happens at the end of the day, when the big end comes, God knows. I suspect I'm building up a big problem for my family if I'm the first to go. So there will come a point in time when I will be selling this stuff or giving it away. But it is, in the meantime, it is what it is. And so what that really means, just in summary, is that I end up having within this library lots of records that I've not listened to, or I've listened to only once or twice in all of those years. But I enjoy having access to them. And I hope when you think about your own libraries or collections, that you also treasure the ability to not be the kind of just somebody who taps into some digital platform, some digital version that you hear and then it's gone and you don't have it anywhere. It's or maybe you've got it on your hard drive, or maybe you're a Spotify listener or Apple Music or whatever it might be. I like the idea that I can pick up the record cover, I can sit there and study it, and I can kind of take myself back to what it was like listening with real dedication and real attention when I was younger. And that's the way I like to consume my music right up until the present day. So that's why I've got a library. That's why I have records I've not listened to. Please forgive me.